Hi, everybody. My name is Vishnu. I'm the host of this podcast, and we have Joe Douglas here. Joe is a three-time Emmy-nominated investigative journalist and the founder of Clear Eye Media. Hey, Joe, how are you?
I'm great. Glad to be here.
Awesome, awesome. If you want to share a little bit about yourself and your background, we can get started from there.
Yeah, so I am a journalist. I used to work full time as a TV news producer and reporter in Los Angeles, California, Portland, Oregon, a couple of the places I worked for over 16 years in television. Like you said, I had three Emmy nominations, including like an investigative reporting Emmy nomination. And I also still do journalism through a blog and a site that I run. And I also write for some local newspapers where I live in Massachusetts. But my main focus and my main career right now is running Clear Eyed Media, which is a
Mhm.
video production company that we make legal videos for attorneys, generally plaintiff attorneys in civil litigation. Uh, usually it's uh, usually it's uh, uh, injury cases or neglect cases. And
Mhm.
I basically make like what a 60-minute style documentary called a settlement documentary, often in these cases, to really bring forward the power, the emotional power, the factual power of these cases. And I also make videos as well. My company also makes documentaries for personal folks. I'm working on a documentary right now for about a woman who's like retiring, and it's kind of for her family. But I do that. I kind of use the power of my skills in video to tell documentary style stories
Mhm.
in a way that it helps my clients in a number of different ways, and it's something I really love.
Oh, fascinating, fascinating. So media plus investigative journalism, and that led you to producing videos for lawyers and legal sector, and then also just founders or individuals who want to say a story about themselves and grow their business. Fascinating, fascinating. Is there a process that you follow to build out videos? How do you actually go about what is your process like?
Well, it's really a lot of just at the beginning, it's a lot of questions. So when someone comes to me and they're interested or they want to find out more about what I do, I'm very open and people can come to me and talk and with no pressure. I'm not
Yeah.
like a big slick sales guy who's going to try to make you buy something. But it's it's really about sitting down and going, okay, well, what are your goals? What do you want to
Mhm.
do here? What do you want to have happen at the end of this video? And that's a really important question. It's kind of a big question, but then you start to understand what they're trying to do. In legal cases, it is like, what is the actual point you're trying to make? And why do you want to do this versus usually I'm in a we're presenting this in mediation because it's before litigation. There's also videos I make, which are I produce, which are day in the life videos where you're just shooting someone in the course of their life
Right.
after an injury and showing how it impacts them. Those are a little more straightforward, and there's a lot of legal requirements you want to meet, but that's
Mhm.
important, and we do that, like because we have to make sure they're admissible in court. Because if they're going to show up in court, they have to obviously be
Interesting.
completely true, yeah, and they have to follow. You're basically following the protocols of the judge or whatever the attorney, my client, has stipulated, and then I make
Mhm.
that clear to everybody on the crew. And we know one of the big things about those kinds of videos is no matter what how it ends up being edited, everything that's in the raw footage is all admissible in court. So I tell
Oh,
everybody like this is all going to be potentially in court. So, we're not, and we make them honest and ethical. We're not showing things. We show people what their real life is like. So if someone got hurt in a car crash or an industrial accident, this is how they get up in the morning and this is how they have a walker or this is the stuff they have to
yeah.
do to their shoes. That's a big part of that kind of a video, and it can be incorporated into a settlement
Mhm.
documentary. But it's really like it's a lot of journalistic kind of things like what happened,
Yeah.
what are we trying to prove, what's the opposition saying, and also like what's the legal theory we're operating under. I'm not an attorney, but I have to communicate usually a big legal thought
Mhm.
or theory by virtue of a story. So it's important for me to know that. So I work hand in hand with them. So I find out that I also really gather a lot. I'm like, what do we have? What do we have in terms of like deposition videos, like people talking on camera already. Because a lot of
Hmm.
times I just gather a lot of stuff and we end up not shooting a lot, but sometimes we do. It depends. So I try
Hmm.
to gather and figure out what we actually have, and then what visual evidence we have, and then what we need. Like, what do we need to shoot? Do we need to go shoot the site of where this incident happened or incidents? Do we
Hmm.
need to shoot another interview or more interviews with other people? And what, and what's going to be within their scope. And so once you get that all documented and laid out, then I make like it sounds kind of boring, but I make a scope of work agreement and a contract. So everything's written down,
Hmm.
very clear. Everybody can see it, all the stakeholders. We will meet maybe a couple of times till that's actually done and signed off on. Then they actually sign an agreement. I sign the agreement. Everybody pays the money up front, blah blah blah, and
Right.
then down the road. And it's really important to have all that clear. And then we go through the process of scripting it, and logging all the interviews and stuff and making a script, and then drafts get approved. There's usually two drafts for each thing, and then drafts of the video get approved. There's usually two drafts of the video,
Hmm.
and then we go forth from there. And usually I've had a great experience where I've had like every video I've made has resulted in a settlement, a substantial
Okay.
settlement for my clients.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's kind of the short version of my process.
Hmm.
And the personal videos, uh, it's actually somewhat similar, although you're obviously not trying to win a legal case. You're really more trying to emotionally connect with the person it's for.
Right.
So often it's a weird thing to say, but I'm happy if the person who looks at it cries. Like, I want it to be,
Uh-huh.
it's, it's not necessarily promotional, although I'd be open to doing that too, like you said, like for business folks. But it's
Hmm.
really more like I'm making on a documentary right now that's about a grandma and her kids, and they wanted to make this substantial video about her because she's a character and she's
Hmm.
really interesting. She has this legacy of love and accomplishment. But it's really like documenting that, but also documenting what she's like and what she's like to be in the room with her and the personality traits. And you take a lot of old pictures and old videos, juxtaposing that with what she's like now,
Hmm.
and you end up creating like a powerful story. That's something that you will always remember them by. And it really means a lot to people when they get that. And it's not just, there's a lot of tools that can put together slideshows automatically and pump out something on your phone, but this is a lot more like intentional than that. It's more of a real documentary
Right.
because I come from that background. So we're getting into who they are in a story that's really hopefully engaging and even funny at times and emotional, and a substantial video that
Yeah.
can be upwards of 20 minutes long. Even I've done feature length documentaries as well,
Yeah.
but it's really fun. And it's just about like I love doing this because I get to use my journalistic skills every day. And I love putting a big smile on people's faces or helping them win cases. It's
Yeah.
really fun.
Yeah. I can see the value in both. I can see the value in the personal videos that you create. Like I would love to show documentaries about my grandparents to my kids, honestly, where
Yeah.
they came from, kind of like passing over the legacy. Like my grandfather, he's an amazing guy. He's passed, unfortunately, but he built his entire house by himself. He's a true mechanical engineer, he's yeah, I mean, I would, yeah, I mean, if my kids got a shred of what my grandfather past looked like, I mean, it would just change their perspective of how they would live. And also I can see how this can impact the legal sector as well. Curious on how it is currently handled, the without the videos, how it's handled in a courtroom, and how does having the video impact success of the cases? Do you have any case studies, or do you have any success stories on that?
Yeah, I mean, so basically what happens with a case like why do they use videos? It's essentially it's a good question. Is that what you're asking?
Uh,
What would they do without it and when do they use it? Are you asking that kind of question? It's a good
that
question, but
that that is a question, but also, is that standard practice? Do they actually use videos all the time, or is it just something that's unique that you're providing, that is, if I was to show a video like that to a jury, yes, amazing. That'll sell quite well with them, right? Uh, versus if it was a speech, or how is it presented in a jury, or a courtroom right now, versus how does this?
Mm,
I'm not fully familiar with the with the legal cases, but just curious on that.
That's totally fair. Those
Yeah.
are really good questions, and like, yeah, a lot of people probably have those questions. And so, I'm in the United States. I know you're in Canada. I don't
Mhm.
really know a lot about the Canadian judicial system, justice system, but I know it's probably substantially different than ours. But it's most of these videos are done pre-trial, like the settlement documentaries, because they're created to hopefully prompt a settlement.
Mhm.
Um, and essentially, like it's a great like most of the time, in most cases, they don't use these kinds of videos. Usually, these videos are my clients tend to be lawyers that are usually have pretty big cases and go after like the big fish kind of things. And they also have cases which they say present well. So you have like and it's also it's not going to come across as powerfully through just documentation and through just reading, and or giving like a some kind of a slide deck presentation at a mediation hearing. Just doesn't
Mhm.
quite capture it as when
Yeah.
you see the person's face or you see them. The big thing I like to show is before and after. And it's just
Mhm.
real. I don't try to be manipulative per se because it's just about being honest and truthful with the evidence. And
Yep.
when you see, I had a case with a guy, a father of two kids, who I have a picture of him holding his children in his arms
Mhm.
before this horrible industrial accident on a work site. He was a contractor. And now he's decrepit and he can barely get up out of bed. His kid has to tie his shoes in the morning, and we have video of that. And there's also like the actual documentation from the doctor saying this, so it's not like we're staging this. I literally show it and make it part of the story. And there's an X-ray of his back riddled with giant screws. And there's shots from the accident of blood on the ground next to the cherry picker thing he was up on, and that really brings you right into like, wow, this is like if this goes before a jury,
Mhm.
we're screwed, is what you. I don't
Yeah.
want to sound sort of, that's kind of what you're getting across to the
Mhm.
mediator and to the defendant. It's like, hey guys, this is the case. This is what you're going to face in a trial. You want to do it? We're
Yeah.
ready to go. But just so you know, here's what this guy's going to look. This is what this looks like. This is what
Mhm.
the visual evidence looks like. This is what the jury's going to see. This is how this guy presents. This is how the facts play out. Because facts are obviously ideas and like things but they're also visual. Like
Mhm.
seeing the scene, hearing the voices, seeing the impact on this man and his children is not just there for manipulation. It's facts of the case because those are the damages that were caused by this horrible incident in this case and in many others. And seeing like I had another case where a guy was released from a mental hospital over and over again, uh, despite him actually imploring them to keep him in the facility. He
Mhm.
kept begging them to keep him. He was like, "I'm going to hurt somebody. I'm going to hit somebody in the head. I want to hit a woman in the head. I want to hit children." It was really disturbing, obviously.
Mhm.
And I had video from the police, a body cam video of him telling the police this, and then police reports of him saying. And then I did my own research because I'm an investigative reporter, and I found out he had warrants out for his arrest in other states for violent
Mhm.
crimes. But this facility kept releasing him back into the public despite all of this evidence. And so this
Mhm.
really helped build this case. And we had the woman who was hurt in her injury in the body cam video of her actually right after the accident, which the incident where this guy threw a rock on her head. And also her testimony in depositions. Well, he ended up just shooting the scene where it happened. And then we had so much from deposition video, from the case file, the rock itself, all this other stuff that we made a video that resulted in a really great settlement. Because and that story, that case probably settled for a lot more than it otherwise would have because reading that in a case file, you can kind of get how dramatic it is. But when you see her and you see the rock and hear this guy imploring people, it really puts the onus on the hospital right away. So it's about like basically just making an undeniable case visually and structurally.
Yeah.
And in terms of
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I can see how it brings like I would assume that the courtroom is quite clinical when it comes to like you're supposed to use the proper words, you're supposed to, address people appropriately. There's a process with which a court case goes along, and bringing in a video that is emotionally charged and provides facts, but in a very raw manner, it very much adds the flavor of pivoting, throwing the opposition of their game, maybe potentially. I can absolutely see that being a massive asset to just a
Yeah,
lawyer
because
or a
well,
legal firm,
once you get to court, the whole thing is different.
or even before
Um,
that, right? Yeah.
yeah, before you get to court is where you do these settlement documentaries. Once you get to court, then they lock into their courtroom presentation, and they have, and understandably, and it's probably a really good thing, they have to follow rules of admissibility and everything else. And
Mhm.
that's why I also do these, typically for court, you don't usually do a settlement documentary because it's like there's all kinds of rules against against, it's not that they think that they're not legitimate or valid. It's just that the rules against hearsay and everything else, it gets really into legalese. You can't show those things typically to a jury. You'd have to
Mhm.
actually have the people testify and show the evidence, raw evidence. But we can do like a day in the life video where, because you can't do that in a courtroom. Like you can see like, okay, well, here's where Bob, this is what he gets up in the morning in his apartment, and here's how he prepares food for himself. And this is like, we try to keep him G rated or PG rated if there was a rating system. But you
Mhm.
will show like, here's what he does in the bathroom. I'll have him wear shorts and a t-shirt, not be nude. But just
Mhm.
like there's often like a chair in the bathroom, to use the shower. There's like little rails on the toilet or something. But like it's important for the jury to see that because it's like, hey, this is the impact of this injury on this person. And you also need to have testimony from family members or close people, because sometimes people have brain injuries and you can really tell the difference. They're not even
Mhm.
always aware of it. It's like, hey, you know what?
Mhm.
Before this accident, Bob used to kill all of us at trivia, and now not so much. Things like that. Kids saying like, Dad used to take us to this. I had a case where the kids are saying, Dad used to take us to the pool all the time. We don't go to the park, and he doesn't do that anymore because he can't do it. And these are like, I try not to be manipulative. I try to be like, these are just facts. These are part of, I tie it into, these are damages. This is actually a damaging thing for his family,
Yeah.
and him. So, and I try to touch on it and then move on the story. I don't want to harp on it so I look like I'm trying to be manipulative. People pick up on that. So you want to make sure you're thorough and you tell the story appropriately and get those points across. But you don't want to be like a dirtbag who's trying to
Yeah.
manipulate everybody. And
Yeah.
you have to walk that thin line.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of your experience comes from the investigative journalism and also the media experience. Let's touch on that a little bit. Tell me, do you have any interesting stories from that era? Uh, let's talk about the investigative journalism, and then we'll
Sure.
move to the media side.
Yeah, I mean, I worked in news for a long time. I still actually write stories all the time as well. I mean, I had a case. One of my more notable stories I did was in Portland, Oregon. I had a story of a teacher who was abusing kids and documented as such by the state, but he was allowed to keep working as a teacher for years, and he got promotions and raises after
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
And he had actually been disciplined for some of this abuse. Um, but they still let him continue working. And it was a case where it had a massive amount of impact because I actually went to a meeting of the school and the whole community that they invited all the other media people to, where the superintendent came and talked about it, and they actually ended up, multiple administrators left after all that, and they replaced the principal of the school, and it was really, and there was like $2.2 million in lawsuits over, it was stuff that I had divulged to the public. So it was really
Mhm.
something else to see like, wow, okay, these people are here because I told them about all this. So it's really like, it's very gratifying, but it's also like, it's also like really disturbing what I uncovered. So there are mixed feelings about it because I don't want to necessarily, rejoice in this horrible predicament, but I'm also proud of myself that I was able to do that. I had another case where I got a guy basically taken out of prison in Mexico. He was falsely imprisoned under false pretenses and accused of all kinds of horrible things. and it was essentially what it looked like was just people were trying to juice him for money. But the government was heavily involved, and there was a prosecutor who was accusing him of all kinds of false things. And I ended up, by virtue of my reporting, getting senators involved and government
Wow.
officials in the United States. And we ended up getting this guy out. He had been doing business for years in Mexico as a food. He was growing food. He was basically like a food importer. And so some folks, the wrong people, got wind of him and figured out they could try to scheme him for money, and they used this to try to juice him as much as possible. But I did a bunch of stories about that from Oregon, where I talked to his brother and other people and made stories about it. I actually even talked to him. He was able to call me from the prison a couple of times because they'd let him make
Mhm.
phone calls. And I did calls with him. And then I got an interview with him when he got back. I was like the first one to get. There's been a
Mhm.
lot of stories, and I recently done stories about there was a police officer that ended up getting fired after stories I did because he was allegedly or he was having inappropriate relationships with a domestic violence victim that he was supposed to be protecting. And then here was also some questions about his relationship with the Proud Boys and
Mhm.
some questions that were never answered about his communications with a Proud Boys member who's a very overt racist and violent person that
Mhm.
he was never charged with investigating. He just had multiple text messages and message between her. Anyway, but it's something I have a passion for and I love to do.
Mhm.
And I will always be a journalist too. I don't necessarily want to do it 100% full time for a living because I feel like it's too much, but I really enjoy what I do. And then the personal video aspect of it, it sounds like it doesn't really match, but it does because I love the gratification I get from telling these stories emotionally and creatively
Yeah.
and just finding little quirky, fun moments in people's lives. The big thing I bring is I'm thorough. I look at everything. I look at all the raw footage. I watch all of it. I look at all these documents and I try to find the story in there that's going to be connected and easy for someone to follow. Even if it's a complicated story, you try to
Mhm.
make it not complicated when someone watches, that they're just pulled along emotionally by this. Either with an investigative story, it's usually I always say there's a what the fuck moment where it's like, what the fuck? And then you're like,
Mhm.
what? And then you want to know more. You want to know why or what. And with a emotional or personal video, it's more like a aw, or it's like a
Yeah.
yeah, this is what it's like to be in the room with grandma. Oh yeah, this looks fun. Oh, I didn't know this about her life. Oh wow, that's
Mhm.
interesting. I didn't know these facts. I didn't know that she did this. I didn't know that they had that. And little, even in a family, there's surprising, cute,
Mhm.
fun facts. We're not doing an investigative story about people's lives like a personal video, but there is
Mhm.
an investigative aspect to it because you're uncovering nice things about somebody that you maybe didn't know. Like you're saying your grandfather built a house, right? Or whatever, and you're proud of that, and that's cool. And you want your kids to know, right? So it's like that might be a good story to tell and to show, that him building the house or the early stages or him finding out that he had those abilities, and that can be really gratifying. So it's all fun, and that's why I do what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're a real life spy then, basically.
In a way, but I mean, I
With
try
all.
to be completely upfront with people about what I'm doing. Even in an
Yeah.
investigative story, you have to be totally fair. So you look into stuff, you pull a bunch of records, you've talked to people, and then you go to whoever the target or the person you're investigating or entity, and you say, "Here's what I found out, and this is
Mhm.
all the information I have. What say you?" And then you open yourself up to you could open yourself up to all that scrutiny, which you should, because sometimes you're wrong, or sometimes you have to be fair. So. And then what you do is once they come back with a response and they tell you that, a lot of times they're like, well, that part of it's wrong, but this part of it is true, but this is what we have to say about it. Then you start writing a story. You're like, okay, well, I'm not going to include that. That's not true. This is what they say about it. Yada, yada, yada. Sometimes they
Mhm.
don't say anything because you really got the goods on them and they have nothing to say.
Yeah.
Um, but you want to be fair and and you always want to be willing to destroy whatever hypothesis you have is because
Mhm.
that's the biggest thing about journalism and communications in general is just be willing to be wrong. Like
Yeah.
before you go to press or before you go out publicly, like really just I always try to think like who's the last person I would want to see this, and then I show it to them. Like it's like who could destroy this and take it all apart? And who does it make me feel kind of scared to show it to? Because it does
Mhm,
kind of.
mhm,
Then I'm
mhm,
going to show it to them. Because that way, you're vetting your work and you're getting it seen by somebody. So, and then in the process, and then I'm kind of going between these legal videos and this, like the legal videos, I don't go to the opposing counsel and show them what we're making, but I show it to the lawyers I'm working with,
mhm.
everything else, because we're making a case. It's not journalism. It's
Right.
it's we're on the side of this case. So we all talk about it and go through iterations together. And it's great when there's a more than one person. I have a lawyer I work with where I'm working with a team. I'm working with a paralegal and an associate attorney and a partner, and all three of them have awesome input. And the paralegals often know the case better than anybody, honestly.
Mhm,
And so they can pick holes in it and be like, what, make sure we include this part, or, oh, that one that's been updated. We need to update this information, whatever. And so you end up having a much better piece. So it's collaboration, uh, and then um, and then seeing it all the way through with the group. It's
yeah,
fun.
it is. It sounds fascinating. Um, it is the storytelling elements of this is quite interesting. It's all the points that you mentioned, hey, not being biased and being courageous enough to show to people that will have the most pushback and exhausting all the options of where you gather the required details. And then walk me through, I guess, what is your process of piecing it together? How do you how do you spend the the noise within the details that you collect? How do you segregate the noise and how do you put the required details together in a legible way so that people see you mentioned, you invoke emotions when it's a personal story, when it's a legal forward, a documentary, you need to present facts in a factual way without over exaggerating certain details. Do you have sort of a mental model that you go across to actually present such a documentary?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. You basically you're always double checking everything, and you're making sure that you have hopefully multiple sources saying things or backing them up.
No.
But in terms of finding a story or a through line or something, because you often just have, with legal cases in particular, I've had cases where I've had like 40,000 pages of documents and PDFs, and just tons of information. It's like drinking from a fire hose. And I'm
Mhm,
like, I got to find a story in all this, right?
mhm,
And it has to be true. And it has to hold up, and it has to be able to it's not going to go to court, but it's going to be up against a mediator and a defense counsel that are going to be able to just rip holes in it if it's anything wrong or
mhm,
weak. So, so you're basically, I mean, I do use like tools that are really robust. One of the tools I use often, uh, in a is NotebookLM, which is a really good AI tool. I use
mhm,
an enclosed, private, secure version of it, and I will do things with the data to kind of anonymize it, if appropriate. I don't like throw everything in there because I'm careful about what goes in there. But it's really good for picking out like and being able to converse with the data and streamline things that are relevant versus irrelevant, so that you're finding things that are helpful to your case or your story, and knowing a bigger decision is often what to leave out,
mhm,
because you're like, if I get into this, this is going to really bog the story down, and it's not necessary. And sometimes it's a painful decision, but it can be a good decision because you're ending up with a more powerful message that comes across.
mhm, mhm,
And then it's just about collaboration. So it's like, showing those scripts to everybody and making sure they're aligned with it. And then and not having an ego and just taking notes and making, if they want to change the direction, they want to do something, you just do it.
mhm,
So I like to look at as much as I possibly can, because I'm always afraid I'm missing something. It's like a fear of missing out, because there's a fact that could destroy your whole story or upend it, or something that
mhm,
makes it clear that you're wrong. That's what I'm afraid of. Or also just really powerful things. Like in the case of a family video, it's like a powerful emotional moment or fact that could really make the story sing. Or in
mhm,
the case of a legal video, something that's like exculpatory that could really destroy the case that have not addressed or gone into. I had a case where I really dug into a massive, the one with like the 40,000 PDFs
mhm,
pages, and I dug into it further I feel like I dug it so far into that case that I actually found things where the people, the targets of the lawsuit themselves were admitting that they were wrong about claims they made in the answer to the lawsuit on camera in
Mm-hmm.
depositions. And I was like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
these guys have said that they knew that people were working in this site. And in their legal response, they said that they didn't know that people were working on the site. Well, I'm like, there's this guy, and they're on camera saying it. And then I found a record where there was a log showing that was signed by one of the managers from the company showing that they knew these guys were there for days before.
Wow.
And that was one of the piece de resistance things in the video. I built up to it. And then I also had testimony from an OSHA or from an inspector that backed all that up too. But even
Mm-hmm.
then, it was a question about whether we could admit that in court ultimately. But I still had it backed up in another way with this record. But it was on sound. You could hear them talking about it, and we had pictures of the scene combined with the images. And I'm able to like cut that together and kind of do these sort of pushes and pulls into documents and images. And you see that and there's a little bit of music, not too much, but it becomes hopefully a compelling documentary where you're hooked in because what's at stake is this guy's health and safety and his children. And then there's the need for accountability for what happened to him, which you
Mm-hmm.
want to have because you want the audience to care enough to watch the whole video. And so there's always some question hanging out over their head, like, what about this? What about that? That's how you string them along. And so
Mm-hmm.
that big payoff was really good. And that came from
Yeah.
digging into it. And I initially started out thinking I had one thing, but the more I dug into the files, I
Story
found that
changes.
gold.
Yeah.
It changed a lot. And then, and that was, I used some of the Notebook LM thing, but I also just dug into it myself and I found things that it wasn't even finding. And I ended up with a way stronger case and a story. So yeah, it's just a ton of work, but it's something I've done for years and I enjoy doing. It can be a lot, but it's fun.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I was gonna ask, how long does the project? I know projects vary, but how long does the project normally take? And what tools are you using on top of the C Notebook LM? What tools are you using to make things easier, make things faster, or provide a better result at the end of it?
It really depends. It's a good question about like how long it takes. It depends on how big the case is, how many files there are, what they're trying to prove, what, when the deadline is. Sometimes there's a mediation hearing coming up and they want to get in and get ahead of it. Um, it depends. I hate to give the weak response of it depends, but it really does a lot of times. But it can, I mean, I can put together a documentary in a couple of days if it's not insane. If you have like and a really good idea of what you want to do with it, and you've like uh, isolated some of the more important elements that you want to have in there. Like you have a really clear idea. If you give me like a phone book worth of information and you want everything done in a week, it's like that might be tough. But
Mhm.
we can talk it through. We can make it happen. I can usually make a lot happen. I come from the world of TV news where I had to put stories on in one day, every day for years. So I come from that world of making things happen now or making things happen after a couple of months. I've had cases where I worked on it for months, and
Mhm.
it really is more of just like I've had attorneys who are smart to like think I'm going to do this eventually, and I want to get this ball rolling, and I do that too. And I'll look at all the data and everything, and I'll start to get an idea of what I want to do early on. The tools that I use generally just use like Adobe Premiere Pro and like Media Encoder,
Mhm.
and I do like Handbrake. I like transfer sources. I'll use um, yeah, and then just Google Drive, and I use like Vimeo to send links around to review them. Often I password protect them because they're private videos, especially in the legal world. I've had some really
Mhm.
hairy cases involving sex abuse where no one else can see them, and most of my cases are private.
Mhm.
That's one of the challenges is almost all my cases are private because they're in litigation and they're for mediators, and they sometimes involve really intimate things. So I can't like go show them publicly,
Mhm.
which can be frustrating because I'm like, I'm really proud of some of the work I've done, but I'm
I
like, I
was
can't
gonna say,
of all
yeah.
the work. I'm proud of all my work, but I can't like be like, hey, look at this. It's just like a
Hmm.
horrible situation that I could never show to anybody. It's super private. And there's
Yeah.
like a handful of people that have seen it. and I got, it ended up working out, but it's like that can be really tough. So I do show, I've had videos I show on my site where, like I made a video for a lawyer, Michael Fuller, who's a really great lawyer in Oregon, who sues the federal government over like what DHS has been doing and stuff. And I made
Mhm.
like a kind of a video showcasing, it's a shorter video, but just showing how he prosecuted that, how he got that case and got a good outcome. And it was kind of like a promotional video, but it's a proof of performance. So sometimes if people want to just see what it's all about, I'll make like what it's like called a cold open
Mhm.
for them. And if for like a lower price to just kind of give you an example of what I do. Like it's like a 2 minute, 1.5 minute video. It's almost like a trailer for your case to
Mhm.
kind of see like this is the power of this medium and what I can do for you. And
Yeah.
then if you want to keep going, that can apply towards the final settlement documentary or video. But also those kinds of videos can also just be great for promotion because they're proof of performance. So instead of you sitting in a conference room talking about what a great lawyer you are, you're like, well, here's this case where this happened, and this is the challenge we faced. This is how we overcame it. You show with evidence, videos, testimony, or just you talking with that stuff playing over it. And then
Mhm.
here's the outcome. And you actually show the ruling, like I'll show a little blurb from the judge's ruling, whatever,
Mhm.
so that it really hits home with people like, wow, that guy really did it. Sort of like what you're
Yeah.
doing with these videos, like you're showing what you
For the
do, what
process.
your company does, right? Instead of just
Mhm.
telling people. So that's what I kind of bring to the fore for attorneys and for folks who want to make videos that melt the hearts of their loved ones.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. What's next for Joe and Clear Eyed Media?
Just more of the same. Just keep making these videos, keep doing this. I really enjoy it, and I'm working on a really big documentary now about like I said, like a grandma, and
Mhm.
then I have another. I always have like a case or two going right now. I'm working on like a big personal injury case out of Utah that is just kind of chugging along. I can't really talk about it because it's kind of a private case, but it's involves some like dash cam video and some other reports and some uh, what's it called? Deposition testimony and stuff. And then I'm gonna have somebody go shoot like the scene, the crash scene. A lot of
Mhm.
times, like the scene itself hasn't been fully shot for like a video. There's like isolated pictures of things, but to capture the story, you want to kind of show where it is. Like there's like
Mhm.
an intersection. This is where it happened, and So I oftentimes deploy or I hire contracted like videographers that I find and I do this all over the country. It's not just isolated
Okay.
geographically. I work in
Right.
Oregon a lot because I know a lot of people there, but I worked in Utah, I worked all over the place. And I'll get somebody to go out and shoot stuff or shoot interviews or whatever. And then I get it all back and then I like write and produce it and edit it
Mhm.
with a team with the collaborative with the clients involved. But I'm the one who does basically all the other stuff. And I find really good people to shoot.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting that you work all over the US. I
Mhm.
mean,
And in Canada, actually,
acknowledging.
too.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a client
Okay.
in Canada right now. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. It was a pleasure speaking with you, Joe. And if you want to tell the audience where they can find you, please feel free to.
Yeah. I have a website. It's cleareyedmedia.com. If you go there, you can see all about my business. And there's a menu item there. You can see our tribute video business and a lot of examples of my work and examples of my legal work and some of my reviews. And yeah, got a 5-star rating on Google. I'm very proud of. And you can find out a lot more about me. You can also just like Google and look me up. You'll find a lot of my stories and stuff. They're still out there. So yeah,
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Joe. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Truly interesting
thank
person.
you. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure talking to you as well. I appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Awesome. Take care, guys. See ya.